Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on June 20th, 2021 at approximately 8:09 a.m. PST. Notice that I almost missed the date. Almost forgot what month we were in. But it is June 20th of 2021 at roughly 8:09 a.m. PST. Now, that said, well, we can see how today's going. Oh, before I forget, to any of you that are listening on today, happy Father's Day. Now, that being said, time to get back to work. If you've got things organized in a sense, which if you're anything like me, that's only in a sense, then you can start moving forward. Now, this little list that I've got here, I've mentioned this multiple times, and yes, I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but only because I am. When you have a list, it will help keep you organized if you're having trouble figuring out where to start to get your life back in the order you desire it. Because, let's face it, you may not be happy with your life the way it is right now, with everything going on in the world, especially in your world. But we're going to block everything else out for just a moment and just concentrate on you. Take a look at your life, yours specifically, that you have control over. Okay. That's where we start, because it's very easy to identify things you're not content with. This idea of planning for the future is great, and I love the idea, but the reality is, I know when I was growing up, I was told that you've got to have your life in order by the time you're 20 if you want to really be successful. Well, the reality of it is that from the number of clients I've had over the years, working in the consulting field, I found that most people are in their late 40s to early 50s by the time they figure out what they want to do with their life. Now usually it's a case of figuring out what they want to do, and by the time they're in their mid 40s to late 40s to mid 50s, they figure out what they truly desire to do, and that's the thing that'll make a difference. If you look back at the various videos I've done in the past under the subsection of that came out well. Under the subsection of language, you'll find a number of videos, one in particular being called Language Want. Listen to that one, and it will explain why I catch myself when I go, I want to do something, and well, no, that's not quite right. It's a question of desiring something or choosing something. Watch that video, it'll explain it. In the meantime, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel so you can get the rest of the videos as they come out. I do my best to get them out first thing in the morning, but that doesn't always work. Of course, my schedule isn't what I consider, shall we say, static. But when you identify what you're not content with, and you start altering that, there's a major combination of things that take place. In order to get your life in order, that's really starting to annoy me. In order to get your life in order, there are three aspects of your life of your person, that have to be in order. And we are every single entity alive is dealing with the same thing. Whatever brought you to where you are, your life right now is starting right here, right this moment. Doesn't matter what your background, you're still right here, right this moment. And this is the only time in existence that you can make a change. You can talk about making changes in the future. You can talk about the changes you've made in the past. But the only time you can actually make a change to the path your life is on is right here, right now. And that's why I keep this fine little sign handy. And yeah, it's a big one because I haven't gotten around to doing anything with it. But that says, I am worth it. And let's face it, if you yourself do not feel that you're worth changing, nobody's going to be able to change it. So take a look at your life, not at where you'd like it to have been. Everybody I've ever met have had regrets of things they should have done or shouldn't have done. I know of one case in particular, the person, they told me, they were a senior when I was talking to them, and they told me they really wish they had handled the situation with the skunk in the schoolhouse a little differently. Because what they did was everybody was standing outside, and this individual walked into the schoolhouse, grabbed a skunk by the tail, and hauled it off the floor. Right. Well, the thing with the skunk, from what I gathered, the thing with the skunk is if you pull its back legs off the table, it can't spray. You know, I mean, if it's not standing, it can't spray. So what he did was he went out, grabbed the skunk by the tail, pulled it off the floor, and then handed it to the teacher. Apparently, this was not a good thing. Now, of course, understand this maneuver was done back in, well, let's see, that would have been back somewhere in the very late 40s, very early 50s. Okay, everybody in their life has, has something that they quite frankly wish they hadn't done. Lord knows I have. Okay, but since I can't change them, all I can do at this point is move forward. Okay, now the thing we have to remember is, as children, okay, before we really have functional control over what we're doing, what we're thinking, we have a tendency of doing things that are really dense, okay, and debatably detrimental, to other people. This does not excuse them, but it does explain why some of us do things that are absolutely ridiculous when we're kids that we would never consider as adults. Okay, and I don't mean the silly things like what I did when I was a child. Used to jump off the roof of a building, of our house to be exact, which, put us 10 feet in the air onto grass. Not necessarily the wisest move, but there is not a snowball's prayer that I do it today. Okay, but pick something you're not content with in your life right here, right now. Okay, grab that neat little notepad, sheet of paper, whatever, and mark it down. I've already got my list started. Every job you pick, okay, make it 15 minutes to half an hour length, if at all possible. Okay, now some of your goals or some of your chores that you've got in front of you may be a little longer than that and may take longer at a stretch. Like, for instance, if the task you set beside yourself is to build a shed, you're not looking at a half hour, at least not if you want to stand up. Okay, things like this will take longer, and that's just the way it is. But when you identify the things you're not content with and you change them to something, you change the things you're not content with, all you're left with is what you are happy with. Now, I mentioned there are well, to say the least, that was annoying. So, anyway, when you eliminate the things that you're not content with, okay, all you're left with in your life is what you are content with. And rest assured, if you're content with everything, your stress level collapses. But like I said, there are three aspects of your personal existence that have to be in balance. You physically require the rest that is required: proper nutrition, proper exercise. Mentally, you've got to be looking at the world and seeing what you're content with. Okay, identifying the changes you require or the changes you desire, and making that your life, your focus. The third aspect is the spiritual side. Now, I've always billed myself as a spiritual guide. This does not mean I build myself as perfect. Okay, but I only follow 3 laws. Okay, and they encompass the whole 9 yards. And if you find a law or a guideline that you're living in life that doesn't fit in these 3, please drop me a line at one of the contact points below and let me know. I've looked into a lot of the major religions, a lot of the so-called New Age belief structures, a lot of the different support systems such as AA, NA. There's a support group out for PTSD. There's child crisis lines, etc. Now the reality is, all of these support groups are viable, but I've always held, find one that you're content with. I'm not saying which one to go to. If you go to a church, a temple, a coven, a support group, doesn't matter. Find a group of people that you can relate to that help you have that center. Now, I'm a firm believer that family is extremely important. Okay. Now, do understand, bloodline family to me is very important, but the reality is there are some bloodline families that are not as stable as you might like. And that's where the chosen family comes in. The people that you choose to hang around, the people you turn to for support. This does not make it right, wrong, or indifference on any side. This is just what you personally require. Okay, and I do encourage you to find them. Okay, I'm not going to tell you which one to go to because, well, frankly, it doesn't work that way. You have to pick your own path. Okay, you absolutely have to pick your own path. But the reality is, from a spiritual standpoint, if you're basing your belief in fear, you're missing the boat. Okay, because ask yourself this: do you feel happier when somebody's screaming at you, or shooting at you, or throwing bombs at you? Or do you feel happier when you're sitting down, having a quiet cup of coffee, having a quiet drink with somebody, laughing about the things that have happened, about the successes you've had, and that kind of celebration? Which one makes you feel better? Okay. Personally, I choose peace. I find that when you're with people that make you content. Now this is really odd when you think about it, because basically I'm reclusive. Okay. I see very few people out in the physical world. I have 3 places I go. Okay. I go for a walk at the local park, and I have a lot of people I know there. Okay, that I'll talk to as I'm walking by. There is one restaurant in Kelowna where I live that I go to. Okay, and in all fairness, I haven't been there for almost 2 weeks now. I'm scared. I've already slated myself. I took a 2-week break from everything. Okay. Not entirely true. I didn't take 2 weeks off from my walk. And as a result, physically, I'm in better shape than I was. But I go to those, and of course, I go to the grocery store when I have to. I made a mistake just yesterday, I guess it was. Went to an area in town that I wasn't familiar with. Okay, because I don't leave my area very much. Like I said, basically reclusive. But found out that I get stressed out way too easy going into areas I'm not content with, that I'm not familiar with. But when you pick a direction in life that you're content, that you're altering what you're not happy with, okay, when you do that, what you find is things are a whole lot different. Okay, because once you eliminate all the things you're not content with, all you're left with is a world that you're personally content with. Okay, by doing that, when you get out into the material world, like with everybody else, even when we're talking about, you focus on the world that is your world. Even by getting that in an organized fashion, you'll find dealing with the people in your own home a whole lot easier. Okay, net result, they'll have an easier time with things. And when you get out of the house and you're out dealing with the public, you'll find that you actually have an easier time handling the stresses out there. Now, I am not one to promote fear. Fear is necessary only in as much as without fear, you won't know what calm is. Flip sides of the same thing. Now, I will tell you, much as I have a lot of respect for anybody joining the military to protect their country and their homeland. Okay, I've got a lot of respect for them. Okay, personally, they wouldn't take me. Of course, being diagnosed epileptic, there was something about, epileptics and automatic weapons they just didn't think was a good idea. Which is entertaining in one concept, when you think of the fact I know people that are trained by the same government, okay, by the same laws to handle explosives, when mentally they're not, by their own admission, not exactly all home. Okay, but that being said, I didn't want to, Myself, I have a problem with this whole thing. I mean, basically, this lifetime, I've become a pacifist. Okay, this does not mean I will not fight for what's mine, but in all fairness, 58 years, and thankfully, never been in a physical fight that didn't involve my family, brothers and sister. Okay, at least not that. Well, that's depends on how you look at it. I've hit 3 people out of anger. Okay, and in a lot of ways, it was self-defense, but that doesn't make any difference. But that's 3 times in 58 years. Much as I know a lot of people that have dealt with legal systems and have had to run into with the law, I thankfully in the 40 years I've been driving, I've never even ended up with a speeding ticket. I've been pulled over for speeding, but never gotten a ticket out of the deal. Okay, so am I perfect? No. Some would say lucky. I debate that on occasion. Stubborn? Absolutely. But with that in mind, as you get the negative things in your life altered so you're content with them, this will have a ripple effect all the way out. Okay, it'll affect the people you deal with, and that in turn will affect the people that they deal with. Okay, so today's going to be an interesting day for me. I've got a list of things to do. I'm going to be stuck in front of my computer for most of the day. I've got one thing I want to do away from here. Okay, because I've got to go for my walk, and for obvious reasons, I'm not taking my computer with me. Okay, but the reason I returned is real simple. There is a message that the entire world has to get, and that is that every single one of you is of equal value. There is no difference in your value based on orientation, on color, on physical abilities, or on physical senses. The size of your pocketbook doesn't matter. Who you vote for doesn't matter. What charities you support does not matter. Okay, you're still all the same. Okay, and the reality for me is I do not see a difference in any of those. I mean, obviously, each one of those qualifiers alters what somebody is like. Your past does alter. It does form how you look at the world today. But it doesn't lock you into being that way tomorrow. Okay, so if you're following what is called a spiritual guide, and they're promoting that you fear something, especially if we're looking at the spiritual side of things from the religious side, if you're following somebody that is telling you fear your creator, that's kind of like somebody coming to you and going, as a kid going, you should fear your parents. Don't worry about respecting them. Don't worry about honoring them. Fear them. Okay, a world built on fear. Well, in case you hadn't noticed, take a look out the window. That's the side effect of a world built on fear. Okay, now, about 40,000 years ago, now, of course, myself, I happen to have memories of lifetimes. Okay, and I'm not expecting you to believe in that. It's just one of the things I deal with. But about 40,000 years ago, mankind actually had peace on Earth. There was no war, there was no greed, there was no jealousy. There was absolutely envy. But understand the difference between envy and greed, in my opinion. Envy says, I really wish I could do what that person does. I'm going to find out how to do it because I desire to do it. Jealousy is the person that goes, I really want what that person has, and goes and takes it, or does something to make the other person lose it. I will tell you, this whole idea of war that people talk about, people have talked about World War III coming and the end of the world and all of this. Well, here's a newsflash for you. Every moment of every day, the world ends. What was there is no longer the static point. Okay. Every single moment, the world ends. Now, as far as is civilization going to collapse? Well, the theory is if people don't change their ways, The answer is yeah, civilization will go into a big problem. Take a look at World War II. The world changed overnight when Fat Boy was dropped. And I think, if I remember correctly, Fat Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, or on Hiroshima. I believe that's right, and if I've got the names wrong, my apologies. No disrespect to anybody intended, but history is not my greatest suit here. But the reality of life is this. The one constant in this world is change. And if you build your world, even your own home, if you build it on fear, okay, you're going to have stress. That's just the way that's going to go. Don't believe me? Try and run it. No, don't. Okay. When you run your household, when you run your life based on love, based on cooperation, based on communication, okay, instead of based on control and fear, okay, when you do that, you'll find your home runs a whole lot more smoothly. Look into the research that's been done. Look into your own life. But the scientists have actually proven that negative energy will have a negative impact on plant life. Okay, on the way plants grow, on the way they flourish. Now, farmers have tried this, scientists have tried it, individual people have tried it. The same thing applies to your kids. Okay, the people in your household, whether they're kids or not, doesn't matter. If you constantly are telling them that they are, that they're stupid, you can bet your bottom dollar that they will end up developing the attitude they're stupid. If you tell the people around you they're absolutely worthless, there is no question they will eventually come to the conclusion that they are worthless. Net result of that, okay, and this is really amplified when we're dealing with bullies, is we have a staggering number of suicides from people. A lot, when we're talking about suicides, it is not age specific. Okay, as long as they're capable of doing something to terminate their life, they're in the right age bracket. But if you're looking at life, okay, if you build your life on fear, on worthlessness, on making other people feel badly about themselves, the odds are it's going to end badly. Okay, now I cannot tell you, well, actually I can. Over the course of my career, and rest assured, I am not a suicide counselor. Okay, I've got a very twisted way of looking at the world, a very different outlook. But in my career, I've had, if I recall the count correctly, 13 calls where people were talking about suicide. One of them was in serious trouble. Okay, and I mean, they were all in serious trouble. The moment somebody is talking about suicide, you're talking about somebody that has lost all direction and all hope of things changing. Okay. Now, I heard about an unfortunate case where a young lass had fought cancer for 13 years and finally said, I've had enough. I just don't want it anymore. Understand, that 13 years was, if I remember the numbers right, it was almost a quarter of her life she had been sick with cancer. And she finally said, I've had enough. And she went the what's called the legal way and got assisted with it. Okay, but there are a staggering number of people that they lose so much, or they've been told so often that they're worthless, that they finally say, I can't take it anymore. Now, if you're one of these people that is, whether you're doing it because you think you're doing the right thing for them, and you're being hard because you think it's helpful, I will tell you, from what I've talked to with the people that have been in these states, and with over 80,000 clients under my belt, rest assured, I've talked to a lot. Okay, berating somebody for getting something wrong or for not being able to accomplish something doesn't encourage them. It doesn't give them this spark. Like, I've talked to some people who have gone, well, I figure if I berate them, they'll get the message and they'll actually do something. It doesn't work that way. What happens is they get into a very black place, and eventually many of them punch their own ticket. Okay, so if you're on a spiritual path, when you run into somebody that's that depressed, okay, two major factors. One, do not tell them that they're being silly, that there are other people, that things could be worse, they always get better. These all, frankly, fall on virtually deaf ears. Okay. But getting them to focus on what they have done. Like I was talking to one client that she was really down on herself. She was 40 years old and had spent 20 years on the street. Right, and she was berating herself because her whole life was not hers to control. And what I ended up doing was I sat there and I listened to her for a moment and I said, okay, look, I can't change the first 40 years of your life. That's what you've got. But understand something. You did the whole thing your way. You could have gone to the police and gone for help that way. You could have reached out to any number of people and asked for help. But you chose to leave the house. You chose to live on the street, and you've chosen to live that way. I says, well done. It's a path I never would have done. Okay, I certainly am not, much as I've got nothing against people living on the street, I'm certainly not in a hurry to go and follow their example. I know it can be done. I'm just not that interested in it. Not for me personally. Okay, but it is time for people to realize. My dad used to say, you never understand. You can never really understand somebody's life unless you've walked a mile in their shoes. And I took it a little bit to the extreme. In order to get a total stranger out of drugs and alcohol, being a non-substantial drinker and no drugs at all, I went into a 26er a night, and we're not going to count the amount of beer. Okay. Plus, of course, I got into the drugs in order to get this woman out. Okay. The day she walked out, I walked out of drugs and alcohol. Have I been there at a 26er a night for, and it wasn't for very long, but I went in as near as I can figure. The fact I went in to pull a total stranger out is the thing that made it easy for me to stay focused on getting out. But the reality is, what people are going through is not something that you yourself likely have a functional grip on. If you're in my field, I am a professional psychic as well, in as much as I can sense what other people have gone through. Sad to say, a lot of it I can relate to. But that doesn't mean it's any easier for them. Okay. So, really, it's time to actively... The saying is, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Okay. Listening to what's going on around you can have an immense impact on the way you cope with things. Okay. Now, I keep these down to a half hour, as I've said before, so give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, okay, because I try and get one of these videos out a day, okay, and it is my hope that with my return here, that this message can get out to the entire world, whether they're listening to video or whether whether you're talking to them on the street, okay, everybody is worth the effort of getting to know. A stranger is simply a friend you've never met. Okay, and working together, we can eliminate war, eliminate famine, eliminate, conflict, greed, the whole 9 yards. It can be wiped out. It's going to take the help of every single one of you. This is not the elite's job. It's not the clergy's job. It's not the politician's job. It's yours. And only you can change your world. But if everybody changes their part of the world for something that they feel is better, and they stay within the 3 karmic laws, then quite frankly, we will end up with a world that we can all stand on, a first world, okay, with a unified populace. Okay, this can be done, but it's going to take work. Now, until tomorrow, and again, in case you missed it right at the beginning, to those of you that this applies to, happy Father's Day, and I will talk to you again tomorrow. Okay. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other, and for pity's sakes, stay positive.